Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lecture 3 of 4 for the GL4U Introduction module set. All of you guys listening now should have already completed listening to Lectures 1 and 2 of the GL4U Introduction module set. As a reminder, my name is Amanda Saravia Butler, and I'm currently the NASA GeneLab Science Lead. So in this third lecture, we're going to be going over an introduction to the command line, to R, and to Jupyter. Let's get started. First, starting off with what is a terminal? A terminal window is a command line interface. It's going to be used to interact with your computer without using any type of graphics. So the terminal window displays a blank text window, which we'll refer to as the command line, where you can type commands to be able to communicate with your computer, as you see in this image below. A terminal uses a specific language interpreter or shell to interpret commands that are going to be typed into the command line. Unix is a computer operating system that's written in the C programming language. And by default, terminals on Linux and Mac computers are going to be running a Unix shell. There's several different types of Unix shells, including ZSH, CSH, TCSH, and Bash, and each of them are going to have slightly different features and functionality, although they're all pretty similar. What I'm showing on this terminal window displayed below here is a ZSH Unix shell. However, during the hands-on content of the GL4U Introduction module set, we're going to be using the Unix shell simulator Bash to be able to run our Unix commands. So next, I'm going to go over the command syntax. General command line syntax is going to go with your name of your command, followed by a space, and then any arguments for that command. Depending on the command being used, arguments can either be optional or required. And just a quick note that arguments can also be referred to as options, parameters, or flags, and you'll hear me refer to these with those different terms interchangeably. All available arguments for many commands can be found by looking at the command's manual or help page, which can be opened directly in the terminal. So to view a command's manual, we can use the man command in Unix, followed by the name of the command of interest. So this is an example of what it looks like, man, and then followed by the name of your command. To view a command's help page, you can use either the --help or the -h flag for the command of interest, and that syntax looks like this, where the name of the command is going to come first, followed by a space, and then either --help or -h, depending on how that program was developed. Below, I'm going to show you the manual of a common Unix command called mkdir, and that stands for make directory. And what you're going to see was displayed in the terminal after I ran the command man space mkdir. So what you'll see here is a nice little overview of how to run that specific command, and we're going to break down the different parts of this manual in the next slide. So in the synopsis section of the makedir manual, it shows you how the command should be run. And so for the makedir command, mkdir is written first, followed by the flags, which are going to be indicated in brackets, and then it should end with the name of the directory that you want to make. This ... here means that you'll be able to make multiple directories with a single command by writing the directory named of each directory that you want to create, separated by spaces. I want you to note that anything in the brackets is going to be considered optional, and any part of the command not in brackets, such as the directory name here, is a required argument for this command. I think I already answered this for you, but for the mkdir command, which part are optional and which are required? So here, these in brackets, so the -pv, -m are examples of optional arguments for the makedir command, whereas the directory name is going to be a required. And do you notice how the different parts of the commands are separated? We did touch on this. They're actually separated with spaces. So on the command line, spaces are very special. Spaces are used to know how to properly separate the distinct parts of a command. So for this reason, it's not going to be ideal for a file or directory, also known as a folder, to be named with spaces included in the name. So it's better to use a dash or an underscore instead of spaces when naming files and directories. Just as an example here, a file named example underscore test1.txt is going to be preferred over example spaced test1.txt. You can open files and manipulate files in Unix if their names have spaces, but you just have to add some additional stuff. So usually it's better to name your files and folders without spaces. So before we run the mkdir command to make a new directory, we first need to decide where to make the new directory. On computers, files are organized into directories or folders. And when you open a terminal, it's going to open to a specific directory on your system, which is going to be referred to as your working or your current directory. And you can see what your working directory is by executing another Unix command, pwd, which stands for print working directory. So in the example below, you'll see the output of that pwd command. So here in this example, the output is going to be /users/a which is going to be our current working directory, a So the last folder showing in this pwd command will be our current working directory. And you can list what's in your working directory with another Unix command called ls, and that stands for list. So in this example below, I just ran this ls command in my current working directory, a and I see a list of either folders or files in that a directory. And just to show you what this looks like with the graphical user interface, we can navigate to the same directory. So in users and then a folder using the Finder window. So this is what it looks like, probably what more of you guys are familiar with. This is on a Mac computer, and here I am in the a folder as indicated at the top here. And do you notice any similarities between the files shown on the command line here versus on the Finder window here? And so you should actually notice that it's exactly the same. So we are looking at the exact same place on our computer. We're just doing it two different ways, one on the command line, the other in the Finder window. But again, both of these are looking at the same location on your computer. So similar to how you can navigate to a different directory or folder within your current directory, just by double clicking on the folder icon when you're in the Finder window, you can use the cd command in Unix, which stands for change directory, in your terminal to be able to similarly navigate between folders. So in the example below, we're going to be navigating to the desktop using the command line on the left, and then I'm going to show you what that looks like in Finder, which you guys are used to on the right. So here in this command, you'll see we use the cd command followed by a space, and then the name of the directory that we want to move into. So we are changing our directory from our current directory to the desktop directory. And then I'm running this pwd command that we saw previously to print my working directory. So you could see that now my working directory is this desktop folder, which was within the a folder where we started from. And that similarly here on the right can be achieved just by double clicking on your desktop icon within the a folder here. And you will get to the same place. Again, same thing that you're doing on both sides, just doing it two different ways. One on the command line, the other using the file browser GUI or graphical user interface. So what's the working directory now? It's going to be our desktop folder. And importantly, how do you notice that the directories are distinguished on the command line here? And so you'll see that each directory is separated by a /. So on the command line, a / indicates a new directory. So let's see what's on the desktop using the ls command in the terminal below here. So if we go ahead and run that ls command again, now that we're in the desktop folder, it's going to list everything that's on the desktop. And if we see in the Finder window here, again, you can compare the content that you're seeing on the terminal versus the content that you're seeing on the desktop folder in this Finder window. And they, of course, should be the same because, again, we're looking at the same exact location on our computer, just looking at through two different ways, the command line and on that Finder window. Now that we've set the desktop as our working directory, we're going to use the mkdir command that we talked about earlier to create a new folder on the desktop. So just as a reminder from the synopsis section of the Make-Dir manual, which shows how the command should be run, that will tell us how we want to run this command. So in the example below, we're going to make a new directory titled My Directory on the desktop using the command line, and then we're going to view what's on the desktop, both in the command line interface as well as in a Finder window. So here again, from within the desktop directory, I'm going to run the command mkdir with a space followed by the name of the directory I want to create, my directory. And then I'm going to run that ls command. If you recall, ls will allow you to list anything without any arguments here. It'd be listing things in your current working directory, so in my desktop. And I can see now that my directory folder is now there on my desktop. And similarly, if you look at the desktop in your Finder window, you will also see that my directory folder was created. So again, these are the same because this is the same location on your computer. Here, I created a new directory using the mkdir command. It is exactly the same thing as if you were to right-click inside your Finder window here and right-click and say, make a new directory. So there's going to be times when we need to set our working directory to a folder that's deep within our directory structure. And rather than navigating one directory at a time, like you would in Finder by double-clicking on one folder and then the next, and then the next, and then the next, you could navigate directly to the folder that you want to get to with just a single CD command or change directory command in the terminal by writing the explicit path to the directory, as you'll see here. So for this example, I started back at that A Saravia directory, which I could see here because I ran PWD, which stands for Print Working Directory, and I'm in the A Saravia directory. So from there, I want to jump two directories to get to that new directory that I created called My Directory. So rather than going first to the desktop, then to My Directory folder, I can go right to the My Directory folder by running the CD command and writing out the explicit path or the absolute path to the My Directory folder. And then you'll see here that after I run that command and then I run PWD, I am now in the My Directory folder. And so the path is like the address of where a folder or file is located on the computer. If there is a location that we need to visit often, rather than writing out the explicit path every time, we can create a variable within Unix that'll contain the explicit path to that location. And to do this, to create that variable in Unix, you use the equal sign. And so here, again, I'm starting at the A Saravia directory, and then I'm going to run this command, which is assigning this variable that I'm naming my dir using an equal sign to the path, the full path to the My Directory folder. And next here, I'm using a new command called echo, which will spit back out anything I tell it to. And I am calling the mydir variable. And note that in Unix, variables are called by putting a $ directly in front of the variable name. So now when I echo the mydir variable here in Unix, I see that it's giving me back this path to my directory, which is explicitly what I told the computer to store as my dir. And now if I want to navigate into my directory, instead of writing the full path like I did up here, I could just say CD and then call my variable because I know that my variable is indicating this path here. So now I am changing directory into that my directory folder again, this time by going into that path that's stored in the my dir variable. And then using that pwd command again, you see that I was successfully able to navigate into the my directory folder. So just a reminder, what command was introduced in the example above was actually the echo command, which again will spit back out whatever we tell it to. In this case, it was the my dir variable. And then what was added to that variable name when we're trying to call it in Unix, it's of course that $ symbol that you see in front of my dir in these commands. So a little bit more on creating variable names. When you're creating variable names, there are a few important things to keep in mind. You do not want to name your variable after a common command, function, or a variable built into the coding language being used, because of course that name is already in use in that program. You want to avoid spaces and any weird characters when naming variables. The reason for that is because, of course, spaces are special in Unix. So if you try to create a variable with a space, that space will not be included in the variable name. And any weird characters or symbols could be misinterpreted by the Unix interpreter. So you want to choose, you also want to choose informative, memorable, and short variable names. So in an example here, if you were to want to create a variable to store gene expression data from a Drosophila melanogaster, or AKA fruit flies, that were grown at 10 degrees Celsius, 20 degrees Celsius, or 30 degrees Celsius, which of the names below do you think would be good variable names to use? I'll give you a second to think about that. And the best options from this list are going to be options 2 and 3. The reason for that being, let's go over the ones that were not selected first and why. So this first variable name is just really long. It tells you all the information you need to know. There's no spaces in it or weird characters, which is great, but it's just a really long variable name. And the whole idea with variables in this context is we want to make it something short. Number 4 here, you'll see is tells you what data is being stored in the variable. So it's an informative variable name. However, it has this degree symbol in here, which could be misinterpreted by the Unix system. If we were to name it echo, of course, we don't want to do this. 1, it's not informative. It doesn't tell us what's stored in that variable. And 2, echo, as we just saw, is a known command within a Unix-like system. Number 6 here, my data. This is nice and short, no spaces, weird characters. This isn't a known command in Unix. However, it's not very informative. My data doesn't tell me much about what information is stored in that variable. Number 7 here, again, it tells me information about what's stored in that variable. However, you'll notice that it uses $, so weird characters here, and particularly the $, if you remember, is how we call variables in Unix. So this will definitely be problematic. And then number 8 here, again, informative as a variable name. However, this would not actually be stored as a variable because it has spaces. And so Unix wouldn't interpret that as one whole variable. So numbers 2 and 3 are great. They tell us what information is stored in the variable. So either using the abbreviation for the scientific name or the common name for the organism. GE standing for gene expression data, delta T standing for change, or DT standing for delta T or change in temperature, separated by underscores so we don't see any spaces. So that's why both of those were selected as good variable names for the information that we want to store inside that variable. So I just quickly went over some of the basics for running commands in Unix. We are going to go over some common Unix commands, including the ones that you see here in the hands-on Jupyter notebook for the Intro to Unix Jupyter notebook. And so I just wanted to list all these here so that way all of you guys will have a little cheat sheet on some common Unix commands that are used and what they're used for. Also, although we didn't go over it in this lecture, in the hands-on portion in the R, Intro to R Jupyter notebook that's part of the introduction module set. It's actually the third notebook in the introduction module set. We're going to go over also R functions and how you run commands in R. These are some of the commands that we will be going over. Again, just wanted to put them in the lecture here so you guys can refer back to this slide deck for common R commands. And just some additional common R commands. These ones are specific for how different ways to manipulate data frames within R, which is something that we do quite frequently in bioinformatics. So lastly here, I just want to introduce the Jupyter Notebook for those of you guys who are unfamiliar. GL4U modules utilize GeneLab and Jupyter Notebook to run commands. So all of our hands-on content, both for this GL4U intro module set, as well as our omics specific module sets, will be utilizing GeneLab and Jupyter Notebooks. Jupyter Notebook was created as part of Project Jupyter. The link to Project Jupyter is there if you guys want to learn more. And this is a web-based application that allows you to create documents that have both narrative text and live code in it, meaning that you can both run commands through a web browser instead of a terminal, and also have the text right there to describe what you're doing. So it's a great mechanism for teaching anything that involves code. And so here is just a screenshot of our RNA-seq omics specific module set, one of the Jupyter notebooks from there, just showing that you have text here explaining what's going on. And this is actually a code block, which is live executable code within that Jupyter notebook that's open on a web browser. So it's super easy to use. And then we'll be able to see the outputs of our commands directly in those notebooks. So you're going to see a lot more of these Jupyter notebooks as we go throughout both the GL4U intro module set, as well as any omics specific module sets. Some additional advantages of using Jupyter notebooks is that it facilitates sharing code and results between groups, so you can easily share these, just like I'll be sharing with all of you the ones that we use in the GL4U hands-on portions. Also, ease of publishing your code. If you write all your code in a Jupyter notebook, when you're doing your research or processing data, and then you go to publish those processed data, you can also publish your code by pointing to your Jupyter notebooks. And importantly, it allows for reproducibility. So as long as anyone installs all of the same programs and the same versions that are utilized in your Jupyter notebook, anyone should be able to run the same code blocks that you've set up in your Jupyter notebook to generate the same results, which ensures reproducibility of your code, which is very important in research. So that brings us to the end of this third lecture of the GL4U Introduction module set. After this lecture, you'll be directed to go to the hands-on portion of the GL4U Introduction module set, which will run you through the first three Jupyter notebooks that are there. And then you should come back for the fourth lecture before finishing that fourth hands-on Jupyter notebook. Thank you.